The howl of the wind carried death's promise across the frozen plains of Wyoming Territory. 1878. Rebecca Flynn's fingers had long since gone numb, her breath barely visible in the frigid night air as she lay half buried in the snowdrift where they had left her to die. The bullet wound in her side had stopped bleeding, frozen by the merciless cold that was slowly claiming her life as darkness crept across her vision. 30 miles away, Dawson Ackerman stood at the bar of the Tin Horn Saloon in Laramie, listening to the whispers that slithered through the establishment like venomous snakes. Word traveled fast, even in a snowstorm. The stagecoach robbery. The lone female passenger. The body left to the elements when she'd fought back against her attackers. "Ain't your concern, Dawson," the barkeep muttered, sliding another whiskey across the scarred wooden surface. "Those Blackwell boys don't leave survivors." Dawson's weathered fingers tightened around the glass. "Where?" "Northern Trail. Near Elk Ridge. But there's a storm coming. You ride out there, you're as good as dead too." Dawson downed his whiskey in a single swallow, the burn nothing compared to the fire in his gut. He'd been tracking the Blackwell gang for months now, following their bloody trail across 3 territories. He'd almost had them in Cheyenne, before losing their trail in an earlier snowstorm. "Much obliged," he said, dropping coins on the counter before heading toward the door. "You're a damn fool," the barkeep called after him. Maybe he was. 15 years as a Texas Ranger before hanging up his badge had taught Dawson that most fools died young. At 34, he'd survived longer than most in his profession, but something about this particular crime pulled at him with unusual urgency. The woman deserved better than to die alone in the snow. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees by the time Dawson saddled his stallion, Thunder. The moon had risen, huge and silver, casting an ethereal glow across the snow-covered landscape. A blessing, that moonlight. Without it, he'd have no chance of finding her trail. "Let's ride, boy," he murmured, swinging into the saddle and pointing Thunder north toward Elk Ridge. Rebecca's consciousness drifted in and out as the snow continued to fall, each flake another small weight pressing her further toward oblivion. The memories came unbidden, leaving her teaching position in Boston, the excitement of accepting the governess position in San Francisco, the promise of adventure and a new start. She'd been naive, believing the journey west would be the beginning of something wonderful. Instead, it might very well be the end of everything. The stagecoach had been running behind schedule due to the worsening weather. When the driver announced they would need to stop at the way station for the night, Rebecca had felt only relief. That relief had turned to terror when 5 men on horseback had appeared from the swirling snow, guns drawn. They'd killed the driver first, then the shotgun rider. The other passengers, 2 salesmen from Chicago, had been dispatched with equal efficiency. Rebecca had watched in horror, frozen with fear, until one of the men had reached for her, his intentions clear in his eyes. Something had snapped within her then. She'd fought, clawing and biting, managing to grab the small derringer from her reticule and fire a single shot that caught one of her attackers in the shoulder. His howl of pain had been followed by the retaliatory blast of his partner's pistol. The bullet had torn through her side, the pain blinding. They'd dragged her from the coach, thrown her into the snow, and left her there to die slowly while they emptied the strongbox and searched the other passengers for valuables. "She ain't worth another bullet," one had laughed. "The cold'll finish her quicker than bleeding out." Rebecca blinked away tears that froze on her lashes. The numbness had spread throughout her body now, a merciful lack of sensation. She found herself thinking of home, of her father's face, of the students she'd left behind. 26 years old, and this was how it would end. Something warm and wet touched her cheek. With tremendous effort, Rebecca forced her eyes open, finding herself staring into the amber gaze of an enormous wolf. No, not a wolf. A dog. Some kind of hound with thick, gray-streaked fur. It whined softly, nosing at her face again. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog barked once, then turned as the crunch of approaching hoofbeats cut through the silence. Dawson had been following the stagecoach trail for nearly 3 hours when Thunder suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward. A moment later, Dawson heard Baron's bark echoing across the frozen landscape. The big wolfhound had picked up a scent and raced ahead while Dawson had been studying the tracks left by the Blackwell gang. "Found something, did you?" Dawson murmured, urging Thunder forward. The moonlight turned the snow-covered landscape into a sea of silver, making the dark shape of Baron visible from a considerable distance. As Dawson approached, he saw that the wolfhound was standing guard over what appeared to be nothing more than a mound of snow beside the trail. Until the mound moved, ever so slightly, Dawson was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside the half-buried figure. Gently, he brushed away the snow, revealing the face of a young woman, her skin nearly as white as the crystals that clung to her dark eyelashes. For a terrible moment he thought he was too late, then those lashes fluttered and eyes the color of twilight fixed on his face. "You're alive," he breathed, relief washing through him. "Not for long," she managed, her voice faint. "That's where you're wrong, madam." Dawson quickly assessed her condition. The bullet wound in her side had stopped bleeding, partly due to the cold and partly because the bullet appeared to have passed clean through without hitting anything vital. Hypothermia was the more immediate danger. Working quickly, Dawson wrapped her in his spare blanket, then lifted her onto Thunder. He mounted behind her, cradling her against his chest. "Stay with me," he murmured as her head lolled against his shoulder. "The way station's only a few miles ahead. We'll get you warm." Rebecca tried to respond, but darkness was closing in again. She registered only the solid warmth of the man behind her, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, and the comforting knowledge that she wasn't going to die alone in the snow after all. The Elk Ridge Way Station was little more than a sturdy cabin with attached stables, maintained by the stagecoach company for emergency stops. Dawson had visited it once before while tracking another quarry and knew it would be stocked with basic supplies. What he hadn't expected was to find it occupied. Light glowed from the single window as he approached, Thunder's hooves muffled by the snow. Dawson's hand moved instinctively to his holster. In these parts, a welcoming light could just as easily signal danger as safety. The door swung open before he could dismount, revealing an elderly man with a shotgun held ready. "State your business," the old man called out. "Name's Dawson Ackerman. I've got an injured woman here who needs shelter." The shotgun lowered slightly. "The stagecoach passenger." Word came through on the telegraph line before it went down. Way station manager rode out to check, never came back. "Blackwell gang got them all except her," Dawson replied grimly. "She needs medical attention, quick." The old man stepped aside. "Bring her in. Wife's got some nursing experience." Minutes later, Rebecca was laid on a narrow bunk near the fireplace, the elderly couple moving with surprising efficiency as they worked to save her life. "I'm Elijah," the old man said, stoking the fire higher. "This is Martha. We're the winter caretakers." Martha, a tiny woman with steel-gray hair, was already cutting away Rebecca's frozen clothing. "This young lady's half-frozen. Bullet wounds not too bad, passed clean through the flesh above her hip. Lucky girl. Her name?" Elijah asked Dawson, who had positioned himself by the window, watching the trail. "Don't know yet. We haven't had much conversation," Dawson replied, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the glass. The Blackwell gang might double back if they realized their victim had survived. How long has the telegraph been down? Since this morning. Storm took out the lines north of here. We're isolated till they get repaired. Dawson nodded grimly. No chance of getting a message to the marshal in Laramie then. They were on their own if trouble came. Martha had managed to get Rebecca out of her frozen clothes and into a flannel nightgown. She was bathing the young woman's face with warm water, speaking softly to her all the while. "There now, child. You're safe. We'll have you warmed up in no time." Rebecca's eyes fluttered open, confusion evident as she took in her surroundings. "Where?" "Elk Ridgeway Station," Martha replied gently. "This gentleman brought you in from the storm." Rebecca's gaze found Dawson, recognition dawning. "You found me. Barron did the finding." "I just did the carrying," Dawson replied, nodding toward the wolfhound now stretched out before the fire. A faint smile touched Rebecca's pale lips. "Thank you both then." Her voice was stronger than before, though still weak. "Can you tell us your name, miss?" Martha asked, helping her sip some hot broth. "Rebecca Flynn. I was traveling to San Francisco to take a position as a governess." Dawson moved away from the window, approaching the bunk. "Did you get a good look at the men who attacked the coach, Miss Flynn?" Rebecca's hand trembled, spilling broth. Martha tutted disapprovingly at Dawson. "Questions can wait till morning. She needs rest." "No," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than her hands. "I want to tell you now, there were 5 of them. The leader was called Blackwell by the others. Tall, with a scar across his right cheek. I shot one of them younger with red hair. He's wounded in the left shoulder." Dawson nodded, impressed by her observational skills and composure. "That's the Blackwell gang, all right. Jesse Blackwell and his brothers. They've been terrorizing stagecoach routes across 3 territories. They killed everyone else," Rebecca whispered, her composure cracking. "So quickly, so casually." "That's their way," Dawson said grimly. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Flynn." "Rebecca," she corrected softly. "After what you've done for me, I think formality seems rather unnecessary, Mr. Ackerman." "Dawson," he replied with a slight nod. Martha interrupted their exchange. "That's quite enough talking for now. Rebecca needs to rest, and I expect you do too, Mr. Ackerman. There's another bunk in the back room." Dawson recognized an order when he heard one. "Yes, madam. I'll just check on Thunder first, make sure he's settled for the night." Outside, the storm had intensified, snow swirling in the moonlight like ghostly dancers. Dawson led Thunder into the small stable attached to the way station, where Elijah's mule and a few stagecoach horses were already sheltered. As he removed Thunder's saddle, Dawson considered his options. The Blackwell gang wouldn't be traveling far in this weather, especially with one of them wounded. They'd hole up somewhere nearby, perhaps even double back to the way station once the storm passed. It would be at least 2 days before Rebecca was strong enough to travel, assuming her recovery went well. That meant 2 days of watching, waiting, and planning their next move. Dawson wasn't a praying man, not anymore, but as he returned to the cabin, he found himself hoping that Rebecca Flynn's luck would hold. There was something about her, a strength behind those twilight-colored eyes that had impressed him. Not many people could survive what she had endured today. Inside, Elijah was keeping watch by the window while Martha dozed in a rocking chair near Rebecca's bunk. The young woman appeared to be sleeping, her breathing even, a hint of color returning to her cheeks. "Any sign of trouble?" Dawson asked quietly. Elijah shook his head. "Quiet as a church on Monday. Storm's getting worse, though. Good. That'll keep the Blackwells wherever they've holed up for the night." "You've been tracking them," Dawson nodded. "For almost 6 months now. They killed a friend of mine, Texas Ranger named Michael Collins. Got him during a bank robbery in El Paso. You a lawman. Used to be Texas Ranger for 15 years. Now I'm just a man settling a debt. Elijah studied him thoughtfully. Vengeance is a cold bedfellow, son. So I've heard, Dawson replied, but it's the only one I've got. Across the room, Rebecca stirred, murmuring something in her sleep. Both men fell silent, watching as she settled again without waking. Get some rest, Elijah said finally. I'll wake you if anything moves out there. Dawson hesitated, then nodded. He stretched out on a bench near the door, positioned so he could see both the window and Rebecca's bunk. Barron padded over and lay down beside him with a contented sigh. Despite his intention to remain alert, exhaustion soon pulled Dawson into a deep sleep. His last conscious thought was of twilight-colored eyes and the remarkable woman who possessed them. Rebecca woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar ceiling and the persistent ache in her side confusing her. Then memory returned: the stagecoach, the attack, the snow, and the man who had found her. "Ah, you're awake," Martha said, appearing at her bedside with a steaming mug. "How are you feeling, child?" Rebecca attempted to sit up, wincing as pain flared in her side. "Better than I expected to, considering." "Careful now," Martha cautioned, helping her into a more comfortable position. "That bullet took a chunk out of you. You're lucky it wasn't worse." "Where is Dawson?" Rebecca asked, accepting the mug with trembling hands. "Outside with Elijah, checking the perimeter. That man hardly slept a wink, kept getting up to look out the window all night." Martha clucked disapprovingly. "Would you like something to eat? I've got bacon and biscuits." The thought of food made Rebecca's stomach growl, surprising her. "Yes, please, I'm famished." Martha smiled. "That's a good sign. Nothing brings back appetite like cheating death." As Martha bustled away to prepare a plate, Rebecca sipped her coffee and took stock of her situation. Her possessions were gone, presumably still with the stagecoach or taken by the robbers. She had no money, no identification, nothing but the borrowed nightgown she wore. The position in San Francisco would certainly be filled by someone else when she failed to arrive on time. Yet despite these grim realities, Rebecca felt oddly calm. She had survived. That was more than the others on the stagecoach could say. The door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and two snow-dusted men. Dawson entered first, followed by Elijah. The wolfhound bounded in behind them, shaking off snow before trotting over to Rebecca's bunk and placing his massive head on the edge of her mattress. "Good morning," Dawson said, removing his hat. His eyes assessed her quickly, some tension leaving his shoulders when he saw her sitting up. "You're looking better." "Thanks to you," Rebecca replied, tentatively reaching out to stroke Barron's head. The wolfhound sighed contentedly. "Storms let up," Elijah announced, stamping snow from his boots. "But there's a good 2 feet of fresh powder out there. No one's traveling anywhere today." "Telegraph lines?" Martha asked, setting a plate of food beside Rebecca, still down. "I climbed up far enough to see the break. Won't be fixed till the crew gets through from Laramie, and that won't be today." Dawson accepted a mug of coffee from Martha. "I checked for tracks. Nothing's moved out there since last night, which means the Blackwells are likely holed up somewhere waiting out the storm, same as us." "What will happen when they start moving again?" Rebecca asked, the reality of her situation sinking in. "They think I'm dead, but if they discover otherwise?" "They won't get near you," Dawson said firmly. "I aim to see them face justice for what they've done." "Nearest marshal's in Laramie," Elijah reminded him. "And the Blackwells have 5 guns to our 2. 3, Rebecca corrected quietly. All eyes turned to her. "I can shoot. My father taught me. That's how I wounded one of them yesterday." Dawson's expression showed surprise, then approval. "That's a useful skill, though I hope it won't come to that." Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Martha said pragmatically. Now, Rebecca needs to rest and heal. You men can talk strategy elsewhere. For the next day and a half, Rebecca grew stronger while the 4 inhabitants of the way station settled into an uneasy routine. Dawson and Elijah took turns keeping watch, while Martha tended to Rebecca and maintained the household. Barron appointed himself Rebecca's personal guardian, rarely leaving her side. During the quiet hours, Rebecca found herself drawn into conversation with Dawson. He told her of his years as a Texas Ranger, of his friend Michael, whose death had sent him on the trail of the Blackwell gang, of his life before that as the son of a rancher near Dallas. "Why did you become a ranger?" Rebecca asked as they sat near the fire on the second evening. She propped up with pillows, he on a stool beside her bunk. Dawson stared into the flames. "Seemed the right thing to do at the time. My father's ranch was raided by outlaws when I was 16. They killed him, took everything worth taking. The Rangers caught them eventually. I decided then that's what I wanted to do, make sure justice found those who deserved it. And now, why did you leave the Rangers?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my taste for it after Michael was killed. Started to feel like for every outlaw we caught, 2 more took his place. Endless cycle. Yet here you are still hunting outlaws, just these outlaws. Once the Blackwells face justice, I'm done." Rebecca studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the weariness in his eyes that spoke of a man who had seen too much violence. "What will you do then?" Dawson shrugged. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe go back to ranching. My mother still has the property near Dallas, though she's living with my sister now." "It sounds peaceful," Rebecca said softly. "What about you, once you're recovered?" Rebecca sighed. "I don't know. The position in San Francisco will certainly be filled by now. I have no family left in Boston. My father passed last year, which is why I decided to seek employment out west." "You're a teacher, you said?" "Yes. I taught at a girls' school in Boston for 4 years. Dawson nodded thoughtfully. "Laramie's growing fast. They'll be needing teachers, I expect." Before Rebecca could respond, Elijah burst in from his watch outside. "Riders coming, 4 of them moving slow." Dawson was on his feet instantly, hand going to his pistol. "Blackwells? Can't tell yet. They're still a ways off, but heading straight for us." Martha hurried to the window. "Could be the telegraph repair crew. 4 men for a repair job." Dawson shook his head. "Not likely." He turned to Rebecca. "Can you move?" Rebecca swung her legs over the edge of the bunk, ignoring the pain in her side. "Yes." "Good. If it's them, we need to get you out of sight." He looked to Martha. "Is there a cellar? Somewhere she can hide?" "There's a root cellar trapdoor under the rug there," Martha pointed. "But it's cold down there. She's not strong enough. I'll manage," Rebecca interrupted, already standing though her legs trembled with the effort. Dawson and Elijah quickly moved the table and rolled back the rug, revealing a trapdoor. The space below was dark and smelled of earth and stored vegetables. "Barron, down," Dawson commanded. The wolfhound jumped into the cellar, then looked up expectantly. "Stay with her. Keep her safe." Rebecca allowed Dawson to help her down the rough wooden steps into the cellar. "What about you 3? We'll just be some stranded travelers waiting out the storm," Dawson replied, pressing a small pistol into her hand. "Take this. Use it if you need to." Their eyes met in the dim light, a current of understanding passing between them. Rebecca nodded. "Be careful." "Always am," Dawson replied with a faint smile. Then he closed the trapdoor, plunging Rebecca and Barron into darkness. Above, Martha quickly arranged the rug and furniture, then bustled around making coffee as though nothing was amiss. Elijah positioned himself by the window, shotgun within reach but not obviously so. Dawson sat at the table, back to the wall, with clear sightlines to both the door and window. Minutes later, hoofbeats approached the cabin, followed by a pounding on the door. "Hello, the house," a rough voice called. "Anyone alive in there?" Elijah opened the door, revealing 4 men on horseback, all heavily armed and trail-worn. The man in front was tall with a scar across his right cheek, Jesse Blackwell. Beside him, a younger man with red hair cradled his left arm awkwardly. "Afternoon," Elijah said cautiously. "Something we can help you with?" "Hope so, old-timer. We're looking for shelter till this weather breaks." "Telegraph repair crew," Jesse lied smoothly. "Lines down north of here." Elijah hesitated just long enough to be believable. "Well, I suppose we can make room. Got my wife and a friend inside already." Jesse dismounted, his men following suit. "Appreciate it. Been a cold ride." Inside, Martha played her part perfectly, fussing over the newcomers like any good hostess while shooting worried glances at Elijah. Dawson remained seated, nodding a casual greeting as the men entered. "This here's Mr. Ackerman," Elijah said. "Got stranded same as you fellas. Heading to Laramie when the storm hit." Dawson noted the way Jesse's eyes narrowed slightly at his name. The outlaw leader had heard of him then. "Good. Jesse Black," the scarred man said, dropping the well from his name. "These are my brothers Tom, Will, and Liam." He indicated the red-haired one with the injured shoulder. "Had a bit of an accident on the trail. Horse threw him, landed on a broken branch." "That's so," Dawson replied mildly. "Looks painful." Liam Blackwell glared but said nothing. Martha set coffee on the table. "You boys must be frozen through. There's stew still warm on the stove if you're hungry." The tension in the room was palpable as the Blackwells settled in, accepting coffee and food. Dawson watched them carefully, noting the way they positioned themselves around the cabin, the way their eyes continually swept the space. They were looking for something or someone. "Any other travelers come through?" Jesse asked casually. "We passed a stagecoach a ways back. Looked like it had trouble." "Haven't seen anyone," Elijah replied. "Telegraph went down before we got any news from Laramie." Jesse nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on a woman's shawl that Martha had left draped over a chair, Rebecca's, salvaged from her frozen clothing. "Pretty thing," he commented. "Yours, madam?" Martha hesitated just a fraction too long. "Yes, gift from my daughter." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted subtly, like the moment before a lightning strike. Jesse's hand moved imperceptibly closer to his holster. "Funny," he said, his voice hardening. "Saw one just like it on a lady passenger yesterday, right before she put a bullet in my brother's shoulder." Beneath the floorboards, Rebecca strained to hear the conversation above. Barron pressed against her side, his warmth a comfort in the cold darkness. The voices were muffled but clear enough for her to make out the essentials. The Blackwells had arrived. They were suspicious. Her hand tightened around the small pistol Dawson had given her. If they discovered her hiding place, she would not go down without a fight. Above, Dawson knew the moment of pretense was over. Jesse Blackwell's hand was now openly resting on his pistol butt, his brothers shifting to alert postures around the cabin. "I think you boys should move on," Dawson said calmly, not moving from his chair. "The telegraph crew won't be by for another day or two." Jesse smiled coldly. "Now why would you say that when we're just getting acquainted? Unless you know something we don't." "I know you're not telegraph workers," Dawson replied. "And I know what happened to that stagecoach." "Do tell," Jesse drawled, his hand now fully on his pistol. Dawson met his gaze steadily. "Jesse Blackwell, wanted in 3 territories for murder, robbery, and too many other crimes to list. Your brother Liam there wasn't thrown from any horse. He was shot by a woman you left to die in the snow." The cabin went completely still. "You a lawman?" Jesse asked, eyes narrowed. "Used to be." Texas Ranger. Recognition flashed in Jesse's eyes. Ackerman, heard of you. You've been on our trail since El Paso. That's right. Where is she? Jesse demanded. The woman from the coach. She's here, isn't she? Gone, Dawson lied smoothly. Took her to Laramie day before yesterday. Marshals got her safely tucked away, giving her statement about how you murdered everyone on that coach and left her for dead. Liam Blackwell spat on the floor. You're lying. No one could have made it to Laramie in that storm. We left before the worst of it hit, Elijah added, backing Dawson's story. Lady was in bad shape but alive. Jesse's face contorted with rage. You expect me to believe that? Search the cabin, he ordered his brothers. She's here somewhere, find her. The Blackwells began tearing through the small cabin, appending furniture, checking the back room, even looking up at the rafters. Dawson remained seated, seemingly relaxed, though his hand had moved closer to his own weapon. She's not here, Jesse, he said calmly. But I am. And I've been waiting a long time to bring you in for what you did to Michael Collins. Jesse paused, a slow smile spreading across his scarred face. Collins, that ranger in El Paso, he died squealing like a stuck pig. It was the wrong thing to say. Dawson's hand moved with blinding speed, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. Jesse staggered backward, blood blossoming on his shirt front. Chaos erupted in the cabin. Elijah dove for his shotgun as Martha threw herself to the floor. The remaining Blackwells opened fire, bullets splintering wood and shattering the single window. Dawson flipped the heavy oak table for cover, pulling Martha behind it with him. Elijah managed to get off one shotgun blast that caught Will Blackwell square in the chest before a bullet from Tom found its mark in the old man's shoulder, spinning him to the floor. Below, Rebecca listened to the gunfire with mounting horror. Barron growled low in his throat, hackles raised. When a bullet splintered through the floorboards mere inches from where she crouched, she knew she couldn't stay hidden any longer. Dawson, Martha, and Elijah were fighting for their lives and hers. With trembling fingers, she pushed up on the trapdoor. It moved slightly, enough for her to see that the table that had covered it was now overturned nearby. Barron squeezed past her, leaping into the fray above with a ferocious snarl. In the cabin, the gunfight had reached a momentary stalemate. Jesse was down but not dead, propped against the wall clutching his bleeding chest. Will was dead from Elijah's shotgun blast. Tom and Liam had taken cover behind an overturned bookcase, exchanging fire with Dawson, who was shielding both Martha and the wounded Elijah behind the heavy oak table. Barron's unexpected appearance changed the dynamic. The massive wolfhound launched himself at Liam, jaws closing around the outlaw's gun arm. Liam screamed in pain and terror as powerful teeth crushed bone. The distraction was all Dawson needed. He rose from behind the table, firing twice in rapid succession. Tom Blackwell's head snapped back, a bullet hole neat between his eyes. In the sudden silence that followed, Rebecca emerged fully from the cellar, pistol held steady despite her shaking legs. Jesse Blackwell stared at her with hatred and disbelief. You, he rasped. You should be dead. So I've been told, Rebecca replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Liam was on the floor, clutching his mangled arm, whimpering. Barron stood over him, growling, daring him to move. Dawson approached Jesse, whose life was visibly ebbing away. It's over, Blackwell. Your gang's finished. Jesse coughed, blood speckling his lips. All this, for a woman, for justice, Dawson corrected. For Michael and for everyone else you've killed. Jesse's eyes glazed over, his final breath rattling in his chest. Dawson checked for a pulse, then shook his head. Dead. Rebecca lowered her pistol, suddenly lightheaded. The exertion and stress had taken their toll on her barely healed body. She swayed dangerously. Dawson was at her side instantly, supporting her. "Easy now, it's over." "Elijah," she gasped, remembering the old man's wound. "I'm all right, child," Elijah called weakly from where Martha was tending him. "Bullet went clean through. I've had worse from breaking horses." Dawson helped Rebecca to a chair. "You should have stayed hidden." "And let you face them alone? I don't think so." Her hand found his, squeezing gently. "We survived this together." Their eyes met, something unspoken passing between them. Then Dawson nodded, a newfound respect and something more evident in his gaze. "Together," he agreed softly. The next hours were spent restoring order to the cabin. Liam Blackwell was bound securely, his injuries treated as best they could manage. The bodies of his brothers were wrapped and moved to the stable to await proper burial once the weather permitted. By nightfall, exhaustion had claimed them all. Martha insisted that Rebecca return to the bunk near the fire, while she tended to Elijah in the back room. Dawson took the first watch, sitting by the window with his rifle across his knees, Barron at his feet. Rebecca couldn't sleep despite her weariness. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind the terror, the violence, but also the courage and unity they had all shown. "Dawson," she called softly. He turned from the window. "You should be resting. I can't, would you? Would you sit with me for a while?" He hesitated, then moved to the stool beside her bunk. "How's your side?" "Painful, but I'll live." She managed a smile. "Thanks to you." "You saved yourself as much as I saved you," Dawson replied. "Not many would have fought back against the Blackwells like you did, or kept their wits in that cellar today." Rebecca studied his face in the firelight. The hard lines seemed softer now, the weariness in his eyes replaced by something like peace. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Your hunt is over." Dawson was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. For so long, tracking the Blackwells has been my only purpose." He glanced at her. "What about you? Still thinking of Laramie, perhaps? I need to find employment somewhere." She hesitated. "Though I admit the idea of settling somewhere peaceful is appealing after all this. Like a ranch near Dallas." The words slipped out before Dawson could stop them. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "That would certainly qualify as peaceful." Dawson looked away, embarrassed by his forwardness. "Forgive me, that was presumptuous." "No," Rebecca said softly, her hand finding his again. "It wasn't presumptuous, it was hopeful." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Dawson felt something like a future opening before him, one that wasn't defined by vengeance or loss. "Rest now," he said, gently tucking the blanket around her. "We can talk more tomorrow." Rebecca nodded, suddenly overcome with fatigue. As she drifted towards sleep, she felt Dawson's hand still holding hers, an anchor in the storm she had survived. 2 days later, the telegraph repair crew actually did arrive, bringing with them news that the marshal from Laramie was on his way with a posse. The crew was startled to find the notorious Blackwell gang already dealt with, 1 brother in custody and 3 awaiting burial. Elijah's wound was healing well, though Martha fussed over him constantly. Rebecca's strength returned a little more each day, especially once she could move around the cabin and help with small tasks. Dawson found himself watching her often, the graceful way she moved despite her injury, the kindness she showed to Martha and Elijah, the intelligence that shone in her twilight eyes. She was unlike any woman he had ever known. On the 3rd morning after the gunfight, Dawson and Rebecca stood outside the cabin, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Barron bounded through the drifts nearby, delighting in the crisp morning air. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said, pulling her borrowed coat tighter around her shoulders. "I never thought I'd appreciate snow again after nearly dying in it." "Nature's like that," Dawson replied. Deadly one moment, breathtaking the next. Rebecca turned to face him. "I've been thinking about what happens next." "Oh." Dawson tried to keep his tone casual, though his heart had begun to beat faster. "Yes, the marshal should arrive today. Once he takes custody of Liam Blackwell, we'll all be free to move on." "And where will you go?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "That depends." "On what?" "On you, Dawson." She met his gaze steadily. "I know we've known each other only a short time under extraordinary circumstances, but I feel connected to you in a way I can't fully explain." Dawson felt something tight in his chest loosen. "I feel it too." "Do you remember what you said about your mother's ranch near Dallas?" He nodded, hardly daring to hope. "Was that merely conversation, or was there something more behind it?" Dawson took her gloved hands in his. "There was more. Much more. Rebecca, I've spent years chasing ghosts, living for vengeance. But finding you in that snowdrift, watching you fight to survive, seeing your courage, it's awakened something in me I thought was dead." "And what is that?" she whispered. "Hope. A desire for a future that's about more than settling old scores." He paused, gathering courage. "I'm not a man of fancy words, but I know what I feel. If you're willing, I'd like you to come with me to Dallas, not as a governess or a teacher, but as my wife." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Your wife? Dawson, we barely know each other." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you're brave and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know that when I'm with you, I feel like a better man than I've been in years. The rest we can learn together." He smiled ruefully. "Unless you think I'm being too forward again." Rebecca laughed, the sound bright in the crisp morning air. "Forward, yes, but I find I don't mind." Her expression grew serious. "Are you certain, Dawson, your life has been so different from mine?" "The only thing I'm certain of is that I don't want to let you go." He released one of her hands to gently touch her cheek. "Say yes, Rebecca. Come to Dallas with me. Let's build something new together." Rebecca leaned into his touch, her heart racing. It was madness, perhaps agreeing to marry a man she'd known for less than a week. Yet somehow it felt right in a way nothing ever had before. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll come to Dallas with you, Dawson Ackerman." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, mindful of her still healing injuries. But it quickly deepened into something more passionate, a promise of the future they would build together. Barron's excited bark interrupted them. Turning, they saw a group of riders approaching from the south, the marshal and his posse, finally arriving from Laramie. Dawson kept his arm around Rebecca as they waited to greet the newcomers. "Ready to start our new life?" Rebecca smiled up at him. "More than ready." The marshal was impressed by their account of the confrontation with the Blackwell gang, commending Dawson for bringing the notorious outlaws to justice. When Dawson explained that he and Rebecca would be traveling to Dallas as soon as she was well enough, the lawman offered them an escort to the nearest functioning stagecoach line. "Least we can do," he said. "The reward money for the Blackwells will be substantial." "You've done the whole territory a service." Dawson shook his head. "Keep the reward. Use it to help other victims of outlaws like the Blackwells." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "That's generous of you." "I didn't do this for money," Dawson replied, his arm tightening around Rebecca. "And I found something far more valuable than any reward." 2 weeks later, Rebecca stood on the porch of a modest but well-built ranch house, taking in the rolling Texas landscape that stretched in all directions. After a journey that had taken them through Laramie, Cheyenne, and finally to Dallas, they had arrived at the Ackerman ranch just as spring was beginning to touch the land. Dawson's mother, Eleanor, had welcomed Rebecca with open arms, delighted that her son had finally found happiness. His sister, Margaret, who lived nearby with her husband and 3 children, had been equally welcoming, insisting that they stay for dinner their first night. Now, as the sun set over the western pastures, Rebecca felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The ranch was coming back to life under Dawson's careful management. He had hired hands to help with the cattle and was making plans to expand the operation. Barron lay at her feet, his position as ranch dog firmly established. He had adapted to Texas life with the same ease Rebecca herself was discovering. The screen door creaked behind her, and Dawson's arms encircled her waist. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Ackerman." Rebecca leaned back against him, savoring the words. They had been married by a judge in Laramie before continuing their journey, a simple ceremony with Martha and Elijah as witnesses. "I was just thinking how strange life can be," she replied. "If the Blackwells hadn't attacked that stagecoach, if you hadn't found me in that snowdrift, I would have spent the rest of my life hunting ghosts," Dawson finished for her, "and you would have been teaching some rich man's children in San Francisco. Instead, here we are." Dawson turned her in his arms, his eyes serious. "Do you regret it, coming here with me, marrying so quickly?" Rebecca shook her head. "Not for a moment. This feels right, Dawson, like I've found where I belong." His smile was tender as he bent to kiss her. "Welcome home, Rebecca, welcome home." 1 year later, Rebecca stood in the nursery of the ranch house, watching as Dawson gently placed their newborn son in his cradle. Michael Elijah Ackerman was barely 2 weeks old, named for Dawson's fallen friend and the old man who had helped save Rebecca's life. "He's perfect," Dawson whispered, his voice filled with awe as he gazed down at their sleeping child. Rebecca leaned against his side, happiness filling her heart. "He is, though I suspect he'll be as stubborn as his father." "And as brave as his mother," Dawson added, kissing her temple. The past year had brought many changes to the ranch. Under Dawson's guidance, it had flourished, the cattle herd growing, the land producing abundant hay and crops. Rebecca had found her place in the community as well, teaching at the local school 3 days a week. They had received a letter from Martha and Elijah just a month before Michael's birth, informing them that Elijah had fully recovered from his wound, and they had decided to retire from their position at the way station. They were now living with their daughter in Denver. Outside, Barron barked, alerting them to visitors. Dawson moved to the window, smiling as he recognized Margaret's wagon approaching. "Your sister's here," Rebecca said, joining him at the window. "With the entire brood from the looks of it," Dawson replied with a chuckle. The cousins are eager to meet Michael. As they went downstairs to greet the visitors, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the brink of death in a Wyoming snowdrift to the warmth and joy of family life in Texas, it had been a path she could never have imagined. Dawson caught her hand as they reached the door. "Happy?" he asked softly. Rebecca squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Completely." Outside, the Texas sun shone down on the ranch, on the family that had formed from the unlikeliest of beginnings, on a love that had been born in the darkest of circumstances, but now flourished in the light. As she stepped onto the porch to greet Margaret and the children, Rebecca silently thanked whatever fate or providence had sent Dawson Ackerman tracking through the moonlight that night, following Barron's keen nose to where she lay half buried in snow. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had transformed into something beautiful, a life filled with love, purpose, and belonging. Barron bounded up to greet the children, his tail wagging furiously. Dawson's arm slipped around Rebecca's waist, drawing her close to his side as they welcomed their family. "Aunt Rebecca, Uncle Dawson," the children called, tumbling from the wagon in their excitement. "Is the baby awake? Can we see him?" "He's sleeping now," Rebecca answered, laughing at their enthusiasm. But perhaps he'll wake up for his cousins. As they all moved inside, the sound of happy voices filling the ranch house, Rebecca caught Dawson's eye. The love she saw there matched what she felt in her own heart, deep, abiding, and built on a foundation as solid as the land beneath their feet. From near death in a snowdrift to this abundance of life and love, it was a journey Rebecca would forever be grateful for. A story she would one day tell their son when he was old enough to understand the remarkable circumstances that had brought his parents together. For now, though, she was content to live each day, embracing the joy of the present and the promise of the future they would build together on this land they both loved. And when winter came, bringing the first snowfall to the ranch, Rebecca no longer feared the sight of those delicate crystals falling from the sky. Instead, she stood with Dawson on the porch, watching the moonlight turn the landscape to silver, remembering the night that had changed everything, the night a cowboy had tracked her by moonlight, and in saving her life, had found his own salvation. "I love you, Dawson Ackerman," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. "And I love you, Rebecca Ackerman," he replied, his arms tightening around her. Yesterday, today, and for all the days to come. In the years that followed, their family grew. Michael was joined by a sister, Eleanor Martha, 2 years later, and then by another brother, James Thomas, 3 years after that. The ranch prospered, expanding to neighboring properties as Dawson's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher spread throughout the county. Rebecca continued teaching, eventually founding a small school on the ranch property for their children and those of neighboring ranchers. Her classes became known for their quality and progressive approach, drawing students from miles around. Barron lived to a ripe old age, spending his final years watching over the Ackerman children with the same devotion he had shown their mother on that fateful night in Wyoming. When he finally passed, the entire family mourned, burying him beneath his favorite oak tree overlooking the ranch house. Each winter, on the anniversary of the day they met, Dawson and Rebecca would stand together beneath the full moon, regardless of weather, remembering the night that had forged their bond. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that night?" Rebecca asked on their 20th anniversary, her hair now streaked with silver but her twilight eyes as bright as ever. Dawson, his own hair gray at the temples, shook his head. "No, some things are meant to be, Rebecca. I believe we were destined to find each other, even in that snowdrift." Rebecca smiled, thinking of their grown son Michael, now attending university and planning to become a doctor, their daughter Eleanor, who had her father's skill with horses and her mother's love of books, and young James, showing every sign of following in Dawson's ranching footsteps. "I believe you're right," she agreed. "Some journeys, no matter how difficult, lead us exactly where we're meant to be." As they stood together under the Texas moon, Dawson's arm around her waist just as it had been that first day on the ranch, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had tracked her by moonlight and changed her life forever.